Welcome everybody to the HolloTalk podcast. This is Jetpack Nick, and this is kind of also my first episode for a new podcast I'm working on called Rewind the Music. So make sure you on the lookout for that when I start putting episodes out on that particular podcast. As you can see, I'm here by myself again today. And this is kind of becoming a thing, which is kind of cool to me, but I digress. The reason we are here today by myself is because I have to talk about music, of course. Like this is what I do. I talk about music on the How Talk podcast and now on Rewind the Music podcast. Um, for people who don't know, Versus has come back officially, and obviously with Versus coming back, there's been a lot of Versus discourse, a lot of Versus conversations, on social media and just in general. Um, the genesis of this particular episode comes from For Hip Hop. Shouts out to For Hip Hop. Make sure you go follow the Instagram For Hip Hop. Shouts out to you. For Hip Hop made a post that kind of reinforced what I've always said on the Hollow Talk podcast, and I've always stood 10 toes on this. So For Hip Hop basically made a post saying that Mary J. Blige, along with R. Kelly, are basically the top two in verses. Like there's really nobody that either one of them can compete against other than each other. So for me, I've always kind of stated that on their respective sides, with R&B men versus and R&B women, them two stand alone, head and shoulders above everyone. I've been on record saying that R. Kelly and Mary J. Blige in a versus setting are the two most unbeatable people in the history of verses. And I had to come on here and like really talk about this because, like I said, I've seen a lot of discourse about this, and the R. Kelly thing was a big thing because people were saying that he would beat somebody like a Stevie Wonder in a verses. And with all due respect to every artist in existence, um R. Kelly is the most unbeatable person in verses. It just is what it is. It just is what it is. And the same goes for Mary J. Blige. Now, what I will say about the Mary J. Blige thing is, in comparison between the two of R. Kelly and Mary J. Blige's like margin of victory, like against any other artist in her respective field or her respective side, is like Grand Canyon level. Like, and this is no disrespect to any other artist or whatever, but just knowing what I know about music, and I know a lot about music. Like I know a lot. Like I know how this, I digress. Mary J. Blige not losing, okay? Mary J. Blige is not losing in the verses. Like, not a shot, okay? Not a shot. For my wrestling fans, y'all know when Shane McMahon would take his opponent and he'd take him outside the ring, put him on the announcer table, and then he'd go in the ring, get on the top rope, and then he'd jump and elbow drop whoever was on the announcer table through the announcer table. That's a visual representation of what Mary J. Blige and R. Kelly would do to people in verses. Like, they would elbow drop everybody. Sorry to say, this is all feelings aside. This is just a strictly a music conversation. Them two are not losing in verses. If you have to have like another visual representation of what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to Mary J. Blige, all you have to do is take a look back at the BET Awards or BET Hip Hop Awards, whatever one it was, back in 2019 when she was getting celebrated and everything, and she did her performance. All you gotta do is look at that. And if that don't tell you what's going to happen in verses, if you go against Mary J. Blige, then nothing will. And I'm sorry to say, this conversation is not for you. But again, I digress. All I wanted to say was that Mary J. Blige and R. Kelly are not losing in verses. And like I said, this is against anybody. This is against And like I said, for the R. Kelly part, this is included Michael Jackson, who I believe is the greatest entertainer to ever walk Earth. He's not beating R. Kelly in the verses. Sorry. This goes for Prince. Prince, everybody knows Prince is my favorite, you know, artist of all time, my favorite musician of all time, and I think he's the best musician of all time. He's not beating R. Kelly in the verses. This goes for Stevie Wonder, who is probably the most important musician of all time. When it comes to verses, just the arena of verses, he's not beating R. Kelly in the verses. I'm sorry to say. In that arena, in a versus arena, like not your whole catalog, because people like to talk about your whole catalog or whatever. Just 20 songs. It's just 20 songs. All you gotta do is win 11 songs out of those 20 to be declared the winner. All you gotta do is win 11. R. Kelly is winning 11 songs over everybody. It is what it is. Sorry. Mary J. Blige, there is nothing for me to even really say about Mary J. Blige when it comes to what she would do in a versus against anybody on her side, when it comes to the ladies. But, and like I said, this is no disrespect to the ladies at all. But again, it's Mary J. Blige. It is what it is. Like I said, if you need a visual representation, go watch the BET Awards in 2019 when she was performing and she was getting celebrated. Just go watch that and come back and talk to me. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not gonna stay here long because, like I said, I'm talking to myself. And if there is anybody that wants to talk about this with me, feel free. I'm cool with that. But yeah, I just had to let y'all know that though. When it comes to verses, Mary J. Blige, R. Kelly, unbeatable. Point blank, period. Regardless of, personal things or whatever. I'm not talking about none of that. That's a conversation for another time. I'm just talking strictly about the music. Strictly music conversation. Mary J. Blige, R. Kelly, that's the end of the story. Point blank, period. Okay, and we can talk about other artists or whatever, rappers and stuff like that, because people was talking about the whole Jay-Z thing or whatever, and Jay said that nobody can stand on stage with him in the verses. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But like I said, we can talk about that in a whole nother conversation. But this conversation particularly is about Mary J. Blige and R. Kelly being the most unbeatable in versus history. And like I said before, shouts out to For Hip Hop, because they had mentioned that as well today, which is why I'm doing this episode. And yeah, Jetpack Nick has been saying that on the HolloTalk podcast for a long time too. Those are the two most unbeatable people in versus history. And yeah, I don't care who you name. I truly don't care who you name. 20 for 20, they're not losing. That's the end of the story. Like I said, we might not ever see it or whatever, for obvious reasons. But yeah, hypothetically speaking, if all things were equal and everybody was able to perform on versus, those two aren't losing. Okay, and I'm standing 10 toes on that. So, like I said, shouts out to For Hip Hop for even bringing this up, and kind of being the genesis of this conversation. But I ain't gonna take up no more of your time. Yeah, go back and listen to the music if you don't believe what I'm saying, and go watch some of these live performances from the said people to really understand what I'm talking about. Specifically, that Mary J. Blige 2019 BET Awards performance. Like I said, if that don't tell you the story, nothing will ever tell you the story. And yeah, like I said, this conversation is not for you if you don't understand that. Sorry to say. But yeah, for my people who are real music people and really understand the nuance of performing on stage and what those songs do to people's spirit, you know what I'm talking about. So with that being said, I will leave you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns about what I just said or whatever, I will be more than happy to talk about music. I can talk about music with anybody. So I am all for it. But like I said, I'm just joining the discourse, and joining the conversation, because like I said, I've said this before on the HolloTalk podcast, and I just had to reiterate it because this is the topic of conversation today. So peace and love to y'all. I appreciate y'all, and I will be back with another episode soon. Peace.